Happy Victober. Today we're celebrating H.G. Wells. Hey there, it's Mitzi. Welcome to my channel and happy Victober. Today for 5 Book Friday, I thought we would focus on a Victorian author, and that is H.G. Wells. But before we get any farther, I wanted to show you another Victober shirt I have. So I have this wonderful shirt of lots of the famous writers during Victorian period, and I just think it's super cute, so I wanted to share that as well. But today we're going to talk about H.G. Wells, and sadly he's not on my shirt. I don't have an H.G. Wells shirt. But H.G. Wells did write during the Victorian period, so since it was a 5 Book Friday, I have this science fiction collection of H.G. Wells, and there happen to be 5 books in this collection, so I thought I would share a little bit about those today. So when I looked up H.G. Wells, it said that H.G. Wells was Herbert George Wells, and he was an English writer who was prolific in many genres. You know, we most of the time think of H.G. Wells, we associate him with science fiction, but he wrote in many genres. It said that he wrote more than 50 novels and dozens of short stories, and I didn't know that about him. It said that he had nonfiction, including works of social commentary, politics, history, popular science, biography, and autobiography. So he wrote a lot, and we can dig deeper into H.G. Wells, and I plan on doing that. But so far, I have only read his science fiction, so again, that's what I'm going to talk about today. And it says here too that he has been called the father of science fiction. I didn't know that. He's best remembered for his science fiction, and he's known as the father of science fiction. And as I was reading through the books, the science fiction by H.G. Wells, I did see where a lot of the elements in these early books of science fiction still continue today. If you read science fiction, you'll definitely see a lot of those elements. And of course, during this time when he wrote these books, it was groundbreaking. So I find that to be interesting. But I was just going to talk about these, and most of these books, except for one, was written during the Victorian period. One of these books was written right at the end, and it had already started being published, I think, in a magazine, but the actual hardcover book wasn't published until 1901 or 1902. I'm not sure. So it was right there at the end of it. But the first one and the most famous is probably The War of the Worlds by H.G. Wells. My son is actually reading this one right now, so I'm going to try not to lose his place because he's reading out of this copy. But this one is a really good science fiction, and it's about an alien invasion, and it is the typical sci-fi, I guess you could call it a sci-fi horror, but it's not scary. But it is scary if you were to think it was going to really happen. You could be afraid. I know that there was this radio drama. Do you remember hearing about that, where there was a radio drama? It was played in America. I'll put down the date here because I can't remember the date of that, but I think it was on Halloween, and they were reading it on the radio, and some people didn't catch the beginning where they were saying this is, you know, a fictional book by H.G. Wells, and it was this radio drama that they thought was really taking place, and there was a panic that happened in this town, in this area, because of the radio drama. So I guess that is a horror, because if you believe that aliens are invading, that would scare you. And during that time period, I think there was a lot of fear of an alien invasion. So I always found that interesting. And I remember, I think we were in 8th grade, and my English teacher had us listen to The War of the Worlds around October. It might have been Halloween because of that being, you know, aired on Halloween. And I remember really being taken in by the story, but I had not read it until much later. And when I read it, I just enjoyed it so much. It is, of course, the radio drama is super close to it, but of course reading it is a little different. You get a few more details. It's a fantastic book. I highly recommend it, and I find that this science fiction, now I can't tell you about his other fiction, but his science fiction is accessible and it reads like a modern novel. So if you enjoy science fiction and if you just want to give him a try, I would start with The War of the Worlds. And by the way, my 18-year-old is reading it right now and he's really enjoying this book. This is what's funny too, before I continue. I told my boys that they were both participating in Victober and they didn't even mean to, because like I said, my 18-year-old is reading this right now, and my son and I are reading some of the short stories from the Adventures of Sherlock Holmes so that we can read them and then watch some of the episodes on his DVD collection. So he's actually participating in Victober too, and I just thought that was funny since I'm a super lover of anything Victorian. So The War of the Worlds is definitely one that I highly recommend, and I think start with there if you're interested in any by H.G. Wells. I also really enjoyed The Island of Dr. Moreau. This was, I'll put all the publications on here as well. The Island of Dr. Moreau is a strange science fiction type book too. In this one we have a man who is shipwrecked on this island, and there are some super strange things happening on this island. Now, that reminds me, this could also count for your prompt adaptations, because I know they have a Tom Cruise adaptation of The War of the Worlds, and I'm pretty sure they have a recent adaptation of The Island of Dr. Moreau. So let me know in the comments if you've seen any of these. And by the way, if they're super scary, let me know that too, because I am a fraidy cat. So if it's super scary, I don't want to see it. But I am interested in watching some sort of adaptation of something by H.G. Wells. Anyway, this was really good, and it was a page turner. And there were some strange things going on, and I loved it. I really enjoyed this one as well. And then, let's see, The Time Machine and Other Stories. Now, I would consider The Time Machine a short story, but when I look it up, it says it's a novel, but it's not that long. And this says in other stories because there's other short stories in this collection. The Time Machine was okay for me. I didn't enjoy it quite as much as I did War of the Worlds, because I think I read that next. It is, you know, I'm used to Doctor Who and the TARDIS, and I am a huge Doctor Who fan. I love Doctor Who and the Time Machine. This is, I guess, probably the first Time Machine story. And it has that feel of the TARDIS and the Time Machine, but then once they get to where they're going, I just didn't like the society. I just was not interested. I thought he could have created a much more interesting society. But that's my take on it, because I think he was trying to say a few things about our society in that, but it just wasn't what I was hoping for. And I guess maybe I've just watched a little too much Doctor Who. I don't know. But anyway, it is one that's not as long if you want to start there. But I would suggest starting with War of the Worlds, because it's a little more exciting than that. And then The Invisible Man is my favorite. It, again, I would consider a short story or a novella, but it is considered a novel. And this one, it reminds me of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson, because there is this potion kind of thing that makes the man invisible. At the beginning of the story is kind of funny, you know, because he's invisible and he's getting away with some things. But as the story progresses, his mind kind of changes in what he's doing as well, and it gets a little more sinister and evil by the end of it. So there is this slow progression as you go with the idea of, you know, messing with nature and things that you don't need to be playing around with, that kind of thing. So I did like that part of it, because I read science fiction and dystopian kind of books for that element. I like to read those for that idea, not as much about, you know, the characters and things, but more about the idea of what they're trying to say. And I think this has a lot of thought-provoking questions. To me, it was similar to the ideas in, as I said, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, as well as Frankenstein. Now, it's not a masterpiece like Frankenstein, but it is a good read, and if you enjoy those books, you may want to pick up The Invisible Man, because I thought it was fantastic. So out of these, I have one more to share. My favorite would be The Invisible Man, and then, what would be next? I probably would say The War of the Worlds would be second. The third favorite would be The Island of Dr Moreau, and then The Time Machine would be at the bottom of my list. Now, I do have one more in this collection, and that is The First Men in the Moon, and this is the one that started out, I think, in a magazine or something in 1901, and I'm thinking that it was actually published as a book in book form in 1902. But I may be wrong. I'll put it up here if that's not right. So anyway, I'm not sure if this is considered Victorian or not, because I know it's at the tail end of that. And I try to just stay in the late 1800s for my Victorian, just in case. But anyway, this is part of the collection, and I do want to read this one. I don't know anything about this one. It says that it is when penniless businessman Mr. Bedford moves to Kent to write a play, he meets mad scientist Mr. Caver, who is developing an anti-gravity metal. This unlikely pair journey to the moon using Mr. Caver's new invention. But what creatures lurk beneath its cratered surface? So that sounds interesting. So I guess they're going to go to the moon and they're going to meet some interesting creatures there, which sounds great. So for me, that sounds fantastic. I love Twilight Zone. That's my favorite show. And this sounds like the Twilight Zone. So I think I like this one. I hope I do. But I do hope to pick this one up soon. So those are just the books that I've read so far of H.G. Wells. This is the little collection I received in this beautiful little slipcase box. For Christmas, my family bought me this collection, and I have really enjoyed dipping in and out of this collection. And again, my son is reading one, and he's loving that too. I do have a couple of other H.G. Wells on my shelf that I want to get to that are not science fiction. So let me know in the comments if you've read any of H.G. Wells' science fiction or any of his other fiction or nonfiction. Let me know what you think of that in the comments as well. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon.